Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 228 of the Canadian Football Countdown, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network. Ryan and Trey with you here this evening. Just the two of us. Trey, how are you doing tonight?
Great, man. It's my birthday in 2 hours and 20 minutes, so I'm doing pretty good. And for everyone that knows my best friend Squishy here, I got some new merch in the mail today. So from my wife, so I'm pretty happy. So yeah, 28 on the 28th. I guess is that the champagne birthday?
I think so. So
you might see me be incredibly intoxicated on Friday at a game we'll talk about in a little bit. So
I'm glad the podcast is Wednesdays, not Thursdays. Well, an early happy birthday to you, and we're gonna have a good time celebrating it, I guess, tonight as we preview Week 17 in the CFL.
No, Mike and Adam, I couldn't have asked for a better birthday.
Well, you're stuck with me, unfortunately. Yeah. We're going to preview Week 17 in the CFL. We'll take a look at the major matchup storylines for each of the games. We'll make our betting picks against the spread and the over/under. And then at the end of the show, we'll go through some fantasy players to watch at each position. We're going to try to continue with the same format from last week. We felt like that went well. Nobody gave us feedback that said it didn't. So, sweet. We're also live on a variety of different platforms thanks to presenting sponsor Game Time TV, which you can learn more about at GameTimeTV.ca or Facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB. We'll take your comments, we'll take your questions in our live chat throughout the night. I see a couple of comments in there already saying happy birthday, Trey. Right on. Before we go any further, we want to acknowledge that the Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as from Treaty 4 territory, traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nation. Final housekeeping note before we get into our game previews here. Again, as always, if you're looking for additional content on top of this weekly episode, make sure you check out the Canadian Football Countdown Discord community. We've got live game chats, lots of CFL fantasy talk, CFL betting talk, NFL talk going on right now there too. That's a hot topic. There is a link in the episode description. It's free to join. Just sign up for a Discord account, join the server, and chat along with us and our other listeners. Lots of fun there every single week. Without further ado, let's get into our first game of the week here, which is the matchup everybody was excited for and has been waiting 17 weeks for. It's the Grey Cup, air quotes, rematch between the Toronto Argonauts and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Winnipeg. This one Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m. Central time. Finally, these two teams are meeting, but it's not exactly the game we all hyped it up to be, because I think the biggest storyline in this game, Trey, is the Argos are resting probably a number of their starters, including quarterback Chad Kelly.
Yeah, my boy's not starting. I'm a little upset with him. I'm going to have to send him a DM and ask him WTF, bro. But maybe him and I will go partying after. I'm sure he's coming to Winnipeg. Still, he'll be on the sideline, right? But it makes sense, right? It's that whole rest versus rust. But I was thinking about this more and more. Would you rather play your starters against potentially the second best team where you got Jefferson and et cetera on defense who we know all can hit, follow through, or would you rather start them against a team like a few of the teams that could be eliminated this week over the next few weeks, right, Ryan? Is that kind of the same thought you have with these starters?
Yeah.
Or would you want them to play?
I don't think I need them to play in this game particularly. And I don't know. So one of the things that's talked about a lot is, the gamesmanship of it. Like, why do you give anything away to Winnipeg, when you might be facing them off in the Grey Cup this year, because they're probably the two favorite teams to go there. I don't know if it's really that much of it. More so, I think we talked about this a little bit last week as well, where we've got nothing to play for Toronto here. And you know what, Bomber fans, so many of them are up in arms because we were hyped up for this game. It's a sold out crowd, and now it might be a bit of a dud matchup but it's who cares? I don't care about that one bit. Like, kudos to the Argos. They wiped the floor with the entire East Division and now have nothing to play for the final 6 weeks of the season. What if Chad Kelly played this game and broke his leg, right? Like, and then all of a sudden, this is a team that now is going into the playoffs with Cameron Dukes as their starter at quarterback for, a meaningful football game, not this one. So, I don't know. To me, I understand the uproar in the sense that people are looking forward to this game and it sucks. But, like, do you blame the Argos one bit?
Nope. I blame whoever made the schedule or the whatever over that, right? Like, because I think the whole load management we see in other sports is a load of crap where you got NBA players playing 50 games out of this, 70, and then you are gypping fan bases who want to see LeBron or I don't even know, Giannis and all these guys come in. Football is different, right? Where it's so violent and limited amount of games. You got to take the rest when it comes. But I think it's smart too because you're doing it, if they do it a smart way, you don't want them to just say, hey, you're not playing the last game of the season. Then they get 2 weeks off with the bye, right? So they're probably going to manage it where some of those starters play, like I said, different teams that last game of the season that might not matter. Why go out there when you're going to have an amped up crowd? There's going to be adrenaline. There's going to be like, you got a team Winnipeg who probably wants to prove that they're better than Toronto. Why risk guys? How is Ouellette out again this week too?
He's been practicing, so he might be back in, right? Like last time, I think was maybe a little bit nicked up, so it was more of a precaution.
But he took last week off. I could imagine maybe he didn't even really have an injury, like a major one or whatever, just enough to go on the one game. And same with Harris. I wonder like how much is he really hurt or how much more maybe he just taken the next few weeks. He's on the 6th game, but he doesn't have to sit there for 6 games, right? So.
Is that a surprise to anybody? Andrew Harris on the 6-game injured list going to come back in the playoffs right in time to, potentially go up and win his 4th Grey Cup? Like, rest him up, get him ready, big game, and he'll get a couple runs in between Ouellette and 4 straight Grey Cups and retire.
I don't know if he would get it, but I would just wish he was able to get the standing ovation. You know what I mean? If the fans were willing to give that to him, I'm not sure how it would go. But I think that's my one disappointment of him not playing.
Yeah,
I think he deserves it. I know I booed him. I'm joking around with that. You got to give a lot of respect to a guy, right? And if it wasn't for Oliveira, he probably would have been kept, maybe more too. So it's a little disappointing with that.
And I don't think any of us hate that decision to move on from him. Clearly, given how well Oliveira has been playing this year. So
and that was I said that a long time ago. Go with the young guy, and something that still Mike argues with me about all the time. But it worked out there, so we'll see.
Yeah, it worked out for everybody. I mean, Harris got another Grey Cup over in Toronto. Oliveira has cemented himself as arguably the top running back in the CFL. It does suck, though, because I believe the Bombers played 1 game in Toronto last year, so Harris didn't get to come back to Winnipeg. And now, you could kind of tell this, and jokingly, but probably non-jokingly, a lot of people early in the season were saying, like, oh, Harris doesn't come to Winnipeg till week 17. Yeah, he's going to be on the injured list by then, because that's just how the recent trajectory of his career has been. So, yeah, this is his final season. He's not going to play here. You're never going to get a chance to see him come back to IG Field in a non-Bomber jersey.
No, did he say he's 100% done, or is that just what it's expected?
I think he already has a coaching job lined up with junior football.
Right. Even if he wants to, let's just say he changes his mind, pulls a Tom Brady, and retires 3 times. Chances are the game next year is just going to be in Toronto, so it doesn't even happen then, right? So if it keeps it to the once a year kind of model, so yeah, that's disappointing. I forgot about the coaching job, but congrats to him. And yeah, anything else? This game's interesting though. Do you think that because I know we have this, the Bombers are always good off a bye, kind of seems to be the story. And yes, Toronto's starting a quarterback that nobody knows anything about, and potentially we don't know who the running back is, and a couple of the receivers are still hurt. But do you think this game is going to be the -7 kind of game that the betting odds says, even with Toronto not? Because to me, sometimes that mystery might just mess with Winnipeg just more. Who are they going to study film on right now?
Yeah, and that's the thing that the Argos are kind of doing smart with their load management here also is it's not just all the starters are resting for these games like we normally see from teams if they've made the playoffs. If they've got nothing to play for in the last 2 weeks of the season, it's okay, all the backups play for the most part. But Alouettes sat last week. Now Chad Kelly sits this week. You rotate a couple of them in and out. Is the team going to take that much of a step back? No, I don't think necessarily they will, the Argos in that sense. But the big concern is the quarterback, because Cameron Dukes, like you said, we know nothing about. We've seen him run a couple 1-yard plunges, and we saw him look not very good against Calgary when Kelly went down earlier this season. So you have a Toronto team that's locked up first, that's resting their star quarterback, playing a Winnipeg team that it very much is in a tight race to lock up first themselves, coming off the bye week, also coming off of a loss, and playing at home where they've lit other teams up in recent weeks. To me, I don't know, if there's no other stories to kind of go off of here, we can just get straight into the betting picks, I guess. You mentioned the -7.5 line.
I have one real quick question. We don't have to get into it much. But do you think a situation like this maybe makes an argument for one division? Because, if there was one division, Winnipeg and BC are still chasing Toronto for a home playoff or a bye, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I would love that, right?
Yeah. I was talking to my buddy about this. Toronto being able to rest with 4 weeks left is kind of a byproduct of a 9-team league with 2 divisions, right? I think it's unfortunate, but is what it is. But yeah, betting odds. I like it. Well, let's see. We talked about it. -7.5. Winnipeg, the home favorites, a touchdown and a little bit more. I don't think I've gotten one right for the Bombers all year because I take them to do it and then they lose or get blown up or have a terrible 3 quarters and then somehow win. And when I don't take them to do it, that's when they win by 40. Oh, good God. I'm going to take Toronto only because I hope to God Winnipeg wins. And I feel like if I take Toronto, I'll do the Bass Askwardsness and Winnipeg will find a way to win. And I'll take the over. I think we could see a shootout. I think we could, even with a backup quarterback, they still have some talent. I could see this being kind of Miami Dolphins playing Miami Dolphins a little bit. I could see some talent putting up some points.
70 points on the board for the Dolphins this week. Are you kidding me?
And I call, you know what? It's great too, because for people who don't know, Coach McDaniels was a ball boy for Denver and got passed over for the head coaching job where he went to Miami. So I love that guy as a coach. He is great. Not
to mention, wasn't there a shout out? Was it on the broadcast where they shouted out and said the Miami Dolphins play that CFL style offensive scheme? And I know there's been a lot of talk about what Tyreek Hill does and that being similar to the Waggle.
Yep, and remember Waddle was out too, right? So because that was a big hole in one of my fantasy teams this week. And I don't know. I like him, coach, saying that he didn't want to go for 72 with the last second field goal. I'm like, that's crap. You do it. We were just talking about gamesmanship. I think you do it because watch there be a tie break for some points forwarded, and it's like a 2-point difference or something. We've seen teams go for late field goals because of a tie break. Right.
Not to mention, you're saying you're up 70-20, and you're saying you don't want to go for the record, right? A field goal would have given them record points scored in a game. You don't want to go for the record with this kick because you're not out here trying to embarrass teams. You already embarrassed them no matter what. You outscored them by 50. It's already there. It's the low of lows for the Broncos that game already, but. No, crazy. What we see is teams score 70 in this game. I doubt it. But I agree that the over is going to be hit between these two teams. And I'm taking the Bombers in this one to cover. Their last 3 home games, I talked on the podcast last week or the week before about how the Bombers suck on the road, and that's why I took the Ticats upset over them. But their last 3 home games, 51-6 over the Riders, 47-17 over Montreal, and 50-14 over BC. The lowest they've scored at home in the last 3 games is 47 points. You can't tell me they're not going to hit the over-under on this game. especially against that Argos passing defense. And yeah, just the matchup, Bombers off the bye, off the loss against Argos with no Chad Kelly. I'm taking the Bombers to cover this pretty easily.
I love Mike McDaniels. I'm just if there's one guy I could just wish he got fired and just come to CFL, because if he does that with Tyreek in a league that has no waggle, what could he do up here? I'm just really interested to know what he could actually do. And like, he's a young guy, started as a ball boy. Remember, don't keep your dreams going. We're two goofballs with a podcast, and you know what I mean? And Mike McDaniels is now a head coach after just being a ball boy, So keep your dream alive.
So you're saying we're a couple years away from I can get into that ball boy role, and then from there it's head coach, right?
I didn't even recognize him when I saw an old video. He got like ears pierced, and he had no glasses, and he had that like boy band Eminem kind of blonde shaved hair, and I was like, no. But anyway, now he's a head coach.
And dropping 70 points on his opponent. All right, let's move on to our second game of the week here, which is the Saskatchewan Roughriders visiting the BC Lions. This one Friday night, second half of the doubleheader, 10:30 p.m. Eastern time, so you get a bit of an overlap between these two games if you're watching on TV. And the Lions are at home here to the Riders, and we talked about it a little bit on the Winnipeg side, but BC is tied for first in the West. They can clinch a home playoff game with a win here. The Riders would not be able to catch them in the standings. And this could potentially, if they pull off a win here, this is going to set up a huge matchup between BC and Winnipeg the following week. So I think that's the big storyline here for BC, right? Is this is a team that's right there at the top of the standings, and I think it's got to go out and try to get this home playoff game because they play. I know you say a home field advantage doesn't matter much, but this is a team that I think definitively plays so much better at home.
If I have to give one advantage, I'll say to the only team with a dome. I'll give it advantage because I was just thinking. We were just joking. I wanted the home playoff game to be the week earlier a little bit, so it'd be less cold, but I'm sure BC would be like, oh, let's play in the dome, but that could also benefit Winnipeg or Saskatchewan or whoever that other team is in that game too, right? Both teams get the better things. Don't get me started on home field, man. Don't get me started on that.
I don't understand your argument, to be honest. I don't think I was there when you and Mike argued about this previously last year. I don't understand how home field advantage does not matter. We've forced 131 time count violations.
And that is the biggest joke in the world. I just mean, I don't think it's worth 3 points anymore on betting. That's for sure. I think that's a lot. I don't know. I just feel like we're in the modern world. We've been to the moon. We got all this stuff, and you're telling me that sure, there might be some ruggedness, but you have to remember too, like the home team flies too back home if they were just on a road game the week before. Sure, there's some advantages to some things, but like these are professional teams. None of them are really living at home right now, if you want to be honest, right? Like other than Brady Oliver and a couple of guys who might play in their hometown, most of them are in a different country. Most of them are probably in a different province if they're from Canada. I don't see home field. I don't know. And the crowd.
It depends on the team to me, right?
Yeah, it depends on the team. And then you get the crowd situation. And I'm not trying to knock Toronto, but some of their home games, you have a lot of Ticap fans. So there's their home field advantage. We see that in the NFL. Teams like the Chargers and Raiders don't really have a bunch of fans. I don't know. And who was home against the Cardinals? Was the Cardinals home against the Cowboys? Or did they beat them in?
No, that I don't know.
Because maybe Cardinals did get a home field advantage. But if you see the Discord, there is an advantage to betting because you get those 3 points that I think don't matter. So anyway, but who's home this game? BC?
Yeah, BC is at home.
Yeah, they'll win. They'll win by 12. Because I think
where were we at on preseason predictions for BC? You were higher on them, right? I was lower on them. I
have them winning the Grey Cup against Toronto. I'm pretty sure. Or them playing against Toronto at least, I thought. Because I thought they'd finish first and then win against Winnipeg at home. But not because of home field advantage, just because they're slightly better team. I don't know.
Looking at it now, Adam had BC in third in the West. I had them in fourth. You had them in first. And you had them going off to the Grey Cup there. So would you say they've met your expectations so far based on how we've seen them play this year?
at the beginning, and then they kind of hit that little dip, and then now they look like they're back at it. And I think next week's game, you can tell who's going to be the one, because you can kind of throw those two games out earlier because both teams blew each other out, Winnipeg and BC, right? So, but I think this is a good one to get prepped up. You have to remember too, like looking at the standings. I know both teams, Winnipeg and BC, are going into this week against a game they should win. If we want to say with Toronto resting a bunch of starters and BC being 4 games better than Saskatchewan, but that also means they might not win likely too. So, oh man, that week, either way, next week's game is going to be hyped.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think I think this is gonna be a good matchup between the Lions and the Riders here as well. And on the other side, it's a Saskatchewan team that's, they're probably going to make the playoffs, I think, right? Like Calgary's not looking great at 4-10. They're only 2 wins back behind Saskatchewan. But I think unless the Riders blow this down the stretch, that's probably theirs to lose. They did lose last week to Ottawa in a game that kind of got away from them, and then they made it interesting in the final minutes, but fell short there. The Riders are a team that they beat the Bombers, they beat the Lions. Those are the 2 teams they'll have to go through if they're going through the playoffs out west, but they've been up and down, and Jake Dolegala, I think, has been up and down at times. And so I don't know, like what's the storyline here for the Riders coming into this game for you?
I know you said, see, I'm not that very convinced that they'll make the playoffs, because let's say they lose this, and then in 2 weeks they have a game against Calgary, right? So I don't know. I think this is more of a must win for Saskatchewan, just because they do still have someone chasing on their tail. Well, BC, I want to know, how much do you think they like the motivation for a bye? Is that a big drive, do you think, coming down the stretch for BC and Winnipeg?
I think it has to be. I just seeing how bad I am at betting this year, and seeing just how volatile the CFL is, and anybody can win any given day, right? Like we've talked about that of look at Winnipeg, BC. They've both lost some games to teams they should have beaten. Toronto lost that one to Calgary. I think that was only because Kelly got injured, but I think it's any given Sunday or Saturday or whatever it's going to be for the playoffs this year. So I think, it's crucial to play for that home bye. And if you're a team like Saskatchewan, you might say it's a team that, okay, they'll probably get into the playoffs. I think they probably will still, but they might kind of limp into there. Well, these next couple of weeks are both get in the playoffs and get yourselves in a bit of a groove for potential playoff matchups. And I think something that Saskatchewan really needs to sort out here is learning how to stop the run, because, a couple of weeks ago in, week 13 or week 14, you had Oliveira run for 154 on them, then Kevin Brown 175 the week after, and then Devontae Williams put up 136 this last week. So, that's 3 games over 130 yards rushing, average of 155. You can't be winning football games regularly if you're giving up that much, right?
No, unless you're my Madden opponent. That's about it. But no, other than that, no. And we're getting to that time of the year, running matters a lot more, right? So, yeah. No, I wish we had Adam here a little bit, because he always, I kind of never can get the sense of Saskatchewan, because they give me the Maple Leaf Cowboy vibes where they're going to win they're going to win. It's kind of hard to really gauge where they're at, because I don't think many fans will honestly tell you what's going on there. So it was nice having Adam, but I can't. Do you have that up where our preseason predictions still handy? Because I can't remember where I put them.
Let's see. The Riders, we all had it 5th in the West Division. So I'd say they, everything seems doom and gloom in Saskatchewan whenever they're not winning. And they're really in any fan base, but I'd say they've had a respectable year, especially given some of the injuries. that they faced at quarterback. And interestingly, last game, Mason Fine did move back up to number 2 on the depth chart and was on the game day roster. I don't think Dolegala is at a point yet where you're pulling him, but you have to wonder. You had Fine playing decent football before. Is there a leash on Dolegala? I think it's still a pretty long one, and I think right now, yes, Adam, I'll admit, does give them the best chance to win the game. But Dolegala, Fine, either of those tall tasks against these BC Lions that can put up points in bunches themselves, and they're getting another big piece back into their offense this week when Dominic Rhymes returns to the lineup for the first time since week 9. Explosive start to the year for him after being one of the top receivers in the league last year. Kind of trailed off for a couple of weeks in and out with injury. They put him on the 6-game injured list, and now he comes back in, and it's almost an embarrassment of riches for the Lions because who's coming out of the starting lineup? It's probably Justin McInnes, who's looked pretty darn good himself the past couple of weeks. So that's something I'm excited for in this game, is just see if Rhymes can bounce back from this injury, because he kind of started strong and then tailed off as the year went along.
Oh, yeah, I agree. It's not a name that you kind of heard over the last few weeks, right? So now I'm really interested to see what BC does. I think that's kind of the key here, because they've kind of, between them and Winnipeg, can you really tell me one's way better than the other? Like, they both showed blowouts and they both lost to teams they shouldn't have, right? So I think they're kind of equal, and it's kind of hard to pick which one I would put over the other right now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a dogfight in that West final between those two teams, or the Riders or Calgary, but probably those two teams, but the Riders could surprise. I think they're a team that can surprise some people. Notable for Saskatchewan, I guess, also to mention this week, Jamal Morrow is still out, I believe, based on the injury report. So probably Frankie Hickson getting another start for them there. Trying to find the rest of this depth chart. There it is.
Adam always has them ready, man. I don't know.
Yeah, Adam's not here. He's always got them ready. That is the most probably notable guy out for them, but they do. And then Anthony Lanier is doubtful, and I think he's the big piece they were really missing on the defensive line last week on there that could be impactful for them.
Is Harris done for the year, or is he just out long term in Saskatchewan?
I don't know. They had that weird press conference with him a couple of weeks ago where it seemed like maybe they would announce that he was almost ready to come back, but then they didn't really announce that. So I think maybe it's like end of season, come back for playoffs, possibly, but could be done.
Do you think he's a guy, though? Like, I understand your argument last year, which I disagreed with about Rourke. I understand that a little more, but a 30-some-year-old Harris, that's like if Bo gets healthy, is he coming back? I hope not. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't take Dolegala's throwing, most games he's throwing 2 to 3 touchdown passes in right now, even if he's not dropping yardage everywhere. So I wouldn't take him out if he's putting points on the board for you necessarily right now. Any other topics on this one, or you want to get into the bets?
Let's get into the bets.
All right, what do we got here?
Another bigger home favorite here, -9 just 9 for BC over Saskatchewan. Oh, I wonder if this is one too. I always want to know what goes in the gameplay, because if BC is up decently at half, do you think they maybe take the foot off the gas a little bit to get ready for next week? Because you don't need Vernon Adams or someone like that going down second half against Saskatchewan if you're up a little bit. And maybe Saskatchewan gets the back door. I'll go BC 9 just because I don't think they will take the foot off the gas pedal. And I'll go under, though. You?
Yeah, I think I like BC at -9 as well. I think they are a team that, like I said, that home field advantage matters. And I think the Riders can't stop the run right now. And Taquan Mizell had his best game of his career last week rushing, and I think could potentially be in line for a big one. Across the board, I like the way the Lions stack up a little bit better here, so I'm going to take them to cover. Even though I hate these big spreads, I struggle with them every time.
Yeah. So did you take over or under?
Oh, I guess I haven't said that part yet.
No.
Over, under. I'll take the over. I think both offenses can put some points up.
I apologize. My brother was texting me about Star Wars, and I got my interest piqued. So I looked up for 1 second when I saw Star Wars on my phone.
All right, let's take 5. We'll be back in a few minutes. No, let's move on.
We're doing pretty good today.
We're on track as we move into our third game of the week, which is the Montreal Alouettes visiting the Ottawa Redblacks. First game on Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern time is the kickoff for this one. And just trying to find, just looking at the playoff scenarios in this one, Montreal can officially clinch their playoff spot with a win over the Redblacks in this game. And Ottawa could be eliminated this week if they lose and if Hamilton and Saskatchewan both win. So a couple scenarios there that would need to play out specifically for Ottawa to be eliminated. But those are kind of the big storylines here. Let's start off on the Montreal side of things. This team can clinch a playoff spot this week. They've been up and down at times. Last week got it done over the Stampeders, shut them down pretty well there. What are your thoughts on Montreal right now and where they're at?
This is a team that grossly overexceeded my expectations this year. I thought, and I think that they're in an interesting spot, though, because, again, they're fighting for that home field advantage that we love so much. But Ottawa, I don't know about Ottawa. They piqued my interest, and I thought, are they going to do it? I thought between them and Edmonton, I thought they had the better chance to sneak in somehow. But man, Hamilton two's there. I don't know. Don't you think the game with Ottawa in the playoffs would be a little bit more exciting than Hamilton? But I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. But I like Montreal's chances in this one. I think this is pretty much a must win for them because don't you think it's a big win when the new ownership comes in on free agency day or after free agency day or whatever it was and big gong show and then they get to host a playoff game this year? Like, I think that'd be a pretty big moral victory, don't you?
Yeah, this was a team that when we were sitting here live, early February, mid-February, we really weren't sure what to make of this team. And I'm still not sure what to make of them because they play really well in games they should win, right? And I've said this week after week, and last week they proved that as well. They should have beaten the Calgary Stampeders, and they did, and pretty handily. They held them to 11 points in that game, just as they have almost every opponent they should have beaten. So this team is able to play some pretty darn good defensive football. They've added some nice new pieces to do that, like Sean Lemon's having being pretty successful there. Darnell Sankey, huge addition lately for them there. They've got a bunch of defensive playmakers. It kind of makes up for some of their offensive inefficiency they've had so far. So, Noel Thorpe, I think it's Noel Thorpe's the defensive coordinator there still. He can put up a pretty good defensive scheme. Now I'm second guessing whether that is Noel Thorpe. I don't know.
I'm terrible with coaches, man. They move around too much.
Looking it up. Hang on. He is the defensive coordinator with Montreal. There we go. I thought he at one point he may have gone over to Ottawa, but I might also be misremembering. But the point is they've put up pretty good defensive performances against everybody else except for the teams ahead of them in the standings. So, this is a team that is going to make the playoffs. They are probably going to get a home playoff game, I would imagine. But then what can they do from there? And what kind of, like I was talking about earlier with other teams, is what kind of role can they get on here late in the season that figures out some of that offensive inefficiency? Cody Fajardo, start putting touchdowns on the board. Let's get those passing touchdowns there. Let's get the ball moving down the field more regularly and get it some consistency going for those big matchups. Because you're going to have to get through Toronto to go on to the Grey Cup out east, right? Like that's booked already. So I'm at a weird place. I want the playoffs. I know there's a couple things still left to be decided, but I just want the playoffs because we're getting the picture. Like in the East, it's pretty much
any of those three versus Toronto, is gonna, and in the West probably Winnipeg, BC. We kind of have a fairly clear picture, but Montreal's that one team. I got more high on them later after, and I think. I don't know. If you had to pick one right now, I know the season's not done, but would you think Fajardo's winning, leaving the marriage of Saskatchewan, or Saskatchewan's winning?
Can I answer neither?
Yeah, neither. They both lost the kids in the house somehow. I don't know. I don't know. I was hoping for Fajardo really to just go out there and, show that he didn't need the Riders, but I don't know if he's still got a few weeks to do that.
Yeah, and he's playing decent football for the most part, but he's just not connecting. I equate it to what we saw from Trevor Harris, the guy who went the other direction for a number of years, where he's a great football player, but he just can't put points on the board at times, and that hurts them. But their defense has done such a good job of bailing them out, and now they face an Ottawa team where their offensive line has struggled to keep Dustin Crum upright, while Montreal's offensive line has struggled to keep Fajardo upright. So, to me, the key in this game is just the battle in the trenches, right? Which offensive line can keep the other defense at bay? Because the Redblacks defense last week against Saskatchewan lit it up. I think Mike had him on his fantasy team. They put up 14 fantasy points in that game, on 5 to 7 sacks, something like that, and 5 turnovers. So, these are two playmaker defenses, and if Fajardo's not really been lighting it up yardage-wise, it's a good opportunity to do so against Ottawa's passing defense that is the worst in the league in that category. So, on the odd, if we want to flip and talk about Ottawa for a bit here as well, I guess the big story is partially their defense is at fault, partially offensive inefficiency, but this is a team that has made games exciting. And I agree with you. I think an Ottawa playoff game would be exciting because it comes down to the wire every time. But last week they finally got the win, but almost blew it at the very end after a number of weeks of it going the other direction. So this is a team that has not been able to get it done when it needed to, and that's costing them because they could be eliminated this week if a couple of those other teams win. So it's do or die time for Ottawa. So what do you got to do to get the win here if you're the Redblacks?
Is the stats page on the CFL website correct?
I think so.
Okay, just making sure. This is the first time I've actually checked out the stats just because of the early season debacle. I stayed away from the stats page because I didn't want to go through PDF forms. But
I love it. I miss
wow, we're two different breeds, Ryan. But if you believe the stats, Devontae Williams is 5th in rushing, and he's behind guys with the name of Oliveira, Brown, Ouellette, and Butler. Those aren't 4 bad guys to be trailing on that list, right? So I think Ottawa, you got to run the ball, right? They ran the ball he had 136 last game, right, against Saskatchewan. Like I said, I've never looked at the stats page. I'm trying to refigure out where everything is. I think you got to give it to your backs, man, and Devontae Williams is definitely one of those guys. You got to create space. You got to create play action and give a guy like Powell. No, not Powell. Crum, right? I keep getting him and Powell mixed up because they're pretty much the same third stringer coming in to save the day, right? So they give Crum the time back there that he needs, and it's and you're not too sure with Hamilton. They beat Winnipeg, but they're not. Is that I feel like not to be disrespectful because we got Hamilton Tiger Cats as fans that we think we're disrespectful, but if that's a game you play 100 times, Hamilton doesn't win that more than 10. Right?
I disagree.
You think so? You think they'd win more?
The Bombers haven't won a regular season road game in Hamilton since Zach Collaros was the last Hamilton quarterback to lose to the Bombers in Hamilton. So
that's fair, but I don't know. Anyway, but they're not a team that's going to consistently do that.
Right.
Even against other teams, or if you switch the playing field, I guess, or played on a neutral site, because neutral site does matter. I think run the ball. I like this time of year because running the ball is what happens, and it's remarkable to me how teams can throw the ball in the even with the 3 downs. How do you run the ball or throw the ball that much?
It's impressive as well with Devontae Williams. Like, he listed 5th in the league in rushing yards. He's also only played 11 games, whereas, Brown's played 15, Oliveira and Butler played 14. Alouettes only played 12, but had a couple more games in at the pace he's going. And Williams probably going to hit 1,000 yards rushing this season. And that's even more impressive when your quarterback's rushing for 40 to 50 yards a game as well. So
yeah, Crum averages 7.4 yards a carry. Like, why did he even throw it? With Williams averaging 5.5, just run the ball every play. And then when they cheat, then that's when you throw the play action. I don't know.
Trey Ford averages 9.9 a carry. He's basically got the first down every time. Crazy.
I just don't understand the running ideas. When you watch it, to me, there's very rarely you see running backs get maliciously stopped in the backfield in the CFL, right? With the yard away. It happens when everyone in the building knows, but most guys, if you fall forward, you're guaranteed 2, 3, 4 yards. I don't get it, but yeah, I've got my whiteboard out, man. I don't know. All you gotta do is just run the ball right up the middle, and you're guaranteed. Even go for it on 4th down. But yeah,
perfect. Yeah.
Betting time or do anything else?
The other guy I want to talk about here was a guy you had in your fantasy lineup last week, and you were high on him, which was Tyson Philpott of the Montreal Alouettes. Last 2 weeks seems like he's coming on a little bit strong. Great season for him last year, his sophomore season. Is he kind of on? Is he kind of on the track to be on the rise here to make it into the top Canadian receiver conversation? I don't think he's quite there yet, but it's kind of nice to see these up-and-coming Canadian receivers.
He's what you think of the traditional Canadian receiver before we had guys like Dembski and Gittins. And I feel like the last few years we've been a little spoiled with a couple positions, but to me, Philpott's a very, very good Canadian receiver. Oh, who did we have? We had that. I don't know. There's a couple of times where a lot of teams, a Canadian receiver is a guy who literally just stands on the far outside of the field, right? And that's kind of what it was. And if he gets a catch or two a game, great. But he's turning into the next kind of Nick Dembski kind of player, and I love it. And I remember when we were talking about him, I know we don't really know much about the youth sports, but we were saying how the one in Calgary was a little bit more higher ranked and higher this, and he's had injury problems. And they're twins, right? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
must be. Or if they're not, they're Irish twins, and that's great. But yeah, I like him. I like what he's doing, and they both had injury problems, but it's nice to see one of them's coming back here and at the right time. And if they heat up, and I think that's all it takes is for Jardo and this guy to heat up and get a little connection going.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice breath of fresh air too, right? We've got a couple good up and coming Canadian receivers, but I feel like we're not in a stage right now where, you go back over the past decade, you've got some real legends of the game there, right? Where I don't know if we're in that state right now. Like Nick Dembski is probably the top Canadian receiver in the CFL. Gittins has taken a step back seemingly this year a little bit. But you've got some good pieces, Philpott, Schaefer Baker, Julian Grant before his injury there. Sam Emelis has had a great year. Justin McInnes also. I think it's just exciting to see some of these Canadian receivers get a little more involved with their teams, and when all that off-season talk about the ratio and whatnot, see these guys contributing out there pretty handily is good to see.
Yeah.
Let's get into our betting picks on this game. The line's a little closer on this one, isn't it?
Yeah, this one's a little bit more our speed. We have Montreal, the road favorite, going into the, what is it, TD place? No.
Yeah.
Well, TD place. Okay, sweet.
You got it.
There we go. I was about to say the donut box, but that's Hamilton. I'm usually good with my stadiums. I'm really good with them until the sponsorship changes. I hate when they do that.
Okay, so not good with coaches.
Not good with coaches.
Good with stadiums. Okay, I'm keeping the list.
Because I play Madden, so it always says what stadium you're in. Right?
But never tells you the coaches, and in the case of Bill Belichick, doesn't even use his likeness.
Exactly. And then I'm 5 years in the future on Madden right now, so they're all computer generated coaches because everyone got fired because I beat them all. But -2 here. I'm going to take the road favorite. I think Montreal, I like them a little better than Ottawa. I think this isn't one I'd be upset, though, Like, this is one, if I was actually at a real parlay and Ottawa ruined it, I'd have to just be like, yeah, this is kind of a tough one, I think. But I'll take Montreal and I'll take the under. You?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on both of those. Again, Montreal has done a really good job of shutting teams down that aren't ahead of them in the standings. This is a game they should win. Ottawa seems to find a way to fall just a bit short. Most times, I know last week they picked up the win there, but I think their offense, that still struggles to put points on the board. They're up to 8 passing touchdowns on the season now after 2 last week. But against Montreal's defense, those are going to be hard to come by. And so I think I like the Alouettes a little better here. But both offenses have not been very efficient putting points on the board. I'll take the under on this one also.
If I'm being honest, I wouldn't bet this game in real life. It's crazy. It's like I said, it's one that you can't be upset. Like, it's one you're gonna coin flip and you hit it. You got beer money. But if you don't hit it, you just can't be that upset with. I don't think. I stayed away from CFL after with how our records have been this year, but
it's tough. It's tough to bet. I came so close this week. I got the first 3 games completely right. Just needed the 4th one, and it came close. But we're going to move on to our next game here and talk about the team that's dead to me for that very reason, which is the Hamilton Tiger Cats hosting the Calgary Stampeders. This one Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern time for this game. It's the big reunion between Bo Levi Mitchell and the Calgary Stampeders. Oh, wait. Nope.
He's got a clipboard.
Yeah, he's got the clipboard on the sidelines. Maybe he'll wave to Dave Dickinson across the field. Maybe they'll share a cute little moment post-game. But it's seemingly going to be Taylor Powell back under center again for the Ticats in this one. Again, another scheduling thing. It's where this meeting should have been earlier in the season, but the schedule was also made before we knew that Bo was going to Hamilton, right? So that's a thing where, in hindsight, it should have been. But like, what are you going to do?
I mean, it's all scripted, right? So they should have known. But that new NFL commercial kills me too. No, you're right. But I think that with the schedule talk, that's why every team should have a home and home. So then this thing doesn't fall through the cracks. But another game that if we look at the line, I wouldn't touch this one at all, because again, you could look at either team. Both teams have had disappointments. Both teams have had obviously they're some limelight when they each got Calgary's got 4, Hamilton's got 6 wins, right? So they have their moments, but I don't even know how to touch this game, Ryan. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, these are 2 teams that have been up and down. I think what you mentioned earlier about Hamilton kind of is pretty much hits the nail on the head of this is a team that won't consistently strike fear into you, but they've won some big games. And last week took a bit of a step back against the Argos once again there. AJ Ouellette wasn't playing and a couple other starters I think were out. You thought maybe Hamilton. I picked them to go and cover the spread. I picked them to win in that game, and they kind of let me down, obviously. And Taylor Powell did not look good early in that game. He got it going in the second half, but there were moments in that game where he's looked decent. He's looked solid in recent weeks, and against the Argos pass defense, you expect more than that, and it seemed like he kind of took a step back. And you've got Jake Mayer on the other end of this matchup, who's been a guy that a lot of times has been the same thing. So, which quarterback would you take right now, head to head?
I almost cursed. Oh my god. I mean, it might have been picked up. I apologize to the kids maybe watching. I guess Mayer, because he's leading the league in passing yards.
He is?
That's according to the stats, yeah.
No, he's the only one that hasn't been injured yet this year, so he's played.
Well, him, Adams, and Collaros all have 14 games. Fajardo's got 14 games. Yeah, and he's beating Vernon Adams by quick math there, 34 yards. And 101 over Collaros. So I mean, you take him, I guess. But Powell also didn't have the opportunities. Like,
Yeah.
he's got like half the game starts, I guess. But I don't know. Comes down to which team do you rather maybe make a playoff push, I guess. I mean, Hamilton's kind of in that position where they're in they're in unless Ottawa really runs the tables, right?
Yeah, Montreal. If Montreal beats Ottawa on Friday night, or is that right before this? I guess that's right before this game, right? That was one we just talked about. So if Montreal beats Ottawa 3 hours earlier, Hamilton can lock up their playoff spot with a win in this game. So not only that, a Hamilton win this week eliminates the potential of a West crossover, which is pretty significant for the team they're facing this week, because then that leaves Calgary with the only option of trying to catch Saskatchewan out west, essentially, to make the playoffs. So big playoff implications, I think, on both sides in this game. That's huge one for both teams here to try to get it done. And, I'm excited for this game. I think this is two teams playing for their playoff lives. They've looked inefficient at times, and one of them's got to kind of put destiny in their own hands here.
If we went back in time and asked preseason Ryan, which team would you be more shocked if we said wasn't going to make the playoffs?
Well, Calgary, of course. Like this is a team. We're in foreign territory when we say Calgary is fighting for their playoff lives here, right? Like, this is a 4-win football team. This is the first time they're below 500. They're going to finish below 500, I think, since, I don't know, early 2000s, if not earlier.
I only ask because there was a lot of hype with Hamilton, I guess, early in the year, and everything like that. But
there was a lot of hype on Hamilton, but also,
how much of it was
I've made it clear. I think I've made it clear over the last 17 weeks my stance on Bowie.
No, I know.
At this point in his career, so
I kind of had see, you're right about the Calgary thing, but in the beginning, if I was looking, I would rather put my money on Bo than Mayer, but Bo didn't make it. But yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It's an interesting one. Again, I guess this kind of keeps things interesting in a 9-team league where a 4-10 team against a 6-8 team is actually kind of intriguing. Because this was in the NFL, this game would be, you wouldn't even see this game on Red Zone, right? So, I mean, but in this league, it's playoff implications. And I don't know. I'm having a tough time with a lot of these matchups because it's such a weird time of year where you have 3 or 4 teams, like we talked about, might be kind of half-assing it or resting and not worrying about it. And then you got 2 teams could be out, and then 2 teams who are fighting for their lives, and 2 of them, I guess, are in this one. So what'd you say? I've heard it that 10 times. Hamilton wins and they're good?
If Montreal also beats Ottawa.
Oh, okay.
But then they'll be fighting Montreal for that home playoff game for the next couple of weeks, right? So,
but if Ottawa loses, though, that eliminates the crossover, or Hamilton wins, it eliminates the crossover.
If Hamilton wins by themselves, if Hamilton outright wins, it eliminates the crossover, and then if Ottawa also loses, it eliminates Ottawa, I think, from the playoffs as well. Is how that works. So big playoff implications here, and I'm kind of hoping for the result of maximum chaos, like whatever keeps the playoff scenarios interesting. Like, we'll still have that race between Montreal and Hamilton, even if they clinch the playoff spot here, but keep as many teams in this for as long as we can, because we're week 17. If we have to come on the podcast for the next 4 weeks and come up with things to talk about when none of the matchups matter, like, what are we going to talk about? It'll be a 20-minute show. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, better early for once on a Wednesday night, but
we'll just end up spending an hour and a half trying to decipher fantasy options from these teams where we don't have the depth charts yet and don't know who's starting and who's not. So I think, hopefully not all of these storylines are locked up in the last couple of weeks or in the next week or two. A couple of interesting notes for both teams, though. The Ticats made a couple of signings today. I think it was Jamal Davis on the defensive line was just released by Montreal. They bring him in there. and wide receiver Darrell Walker brought in by the Ticats here. I don't know. Where do you stand on Darrell Walker? Because I've seen mixed opinions on him at this point in his career.
Is it bad to say that he's barely been on my radar, so I don't really have an opinion? Like, he's not a... It's just a name you hear and you're like, oh, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just my... Was he on Saskatchewan for a bit, right?
He was, yeah. He ended up... So, started his career great with the Elks.
Right, okay.
Toronto for a year or two. I think there was an NFL stint either before or after that. Was with the Argos, lit it up good with them. Then ended up re-signing with the Elks. That stint went okay. Signed with the Riders this offseason and looked like he was their best receiver in camp, but got hurt early in the season, and that's when Tevin Jones and Sean Bain and Sam Emilus all took over, and there just wasn't a spot for Walker when he came back. So I know he's kind of been on decline the last couple of years, but I think he's still a pretty solid receiver, and Hamilton's a team that I'd have to see where he fits in, because on the Riders, he lined up at left wideout earlier this season, but I think they're pretty solid with Terry Godwin and Tim White on that side. But the Ticats have been rotating receivers left and right over on the kind of the right of the quarterback there. So I think there is an option to get a more veteran piece in Walker in there and maybe make an impact down the stretch here for them.
No, I agree. It's the same thing I said last year about Toronto having Harris and Banks. Right?
Yeah.
Even if Walker literally plays 2 snaps a game, that could be the game-winning catch in the playoffs, right? And so,
yeah, for sure. And on the other side, Calgary, interestingly, releasing Markeith Ambles. They signed him a couple weeks ago. He took Trey Odom-Duke's spot in that starting lineup for a couple of games there, and seemed like he was performing well. Suddenly he was out of the lineup last week. Odom-Dukes was back in, and now Markeith Ambles has been released. So not really sure what went on there. Like, he was playing well. I don't know if there was something else that we're unaware of that happened there, or it's kind of weird what Calgary's done there, where Odom-Dukes was also playing well and then was suddenly on the practice roster for a couple of weeks. So I guess Dave Dickinson's just trying, and crew are just trying to, rotate in and figure out what the right combo for Jake Mayer is. And we're 17 weeks into the season, and we know that right combo includes Reggie Bagleton for sure, over and over and over and over again. That's the last I'll talk on that after it ruined my fantasy playoff chances. Just kidding. We'll get to that later. But the other pieces, much like Hamilton, I think it's just been rotated in and out there. Anything else on this game you want to talk about before we make our betting picks?
Yeah, do you think there's been do you think one thing that faults Calgary is their running game doesn't seem to be quite the same?
That's true. It does not seem to be as big of an impact, and maybe it's definitely not as big as we thought it would be, because whether it was Carey or Mills, we had such high hopes for them this year. And some games it's looked good, but other games it's just been kind of average for them, right? And Carey was the league's leading rusher last year, and now I think is still doing all right, but maybe took him some time to come back from that injury.
No, I was wondering, because I was like, that's not a team that you feel like you heard much about running this year, but they traditionally have been pretty good at it with Carey and Cornish and other names over the last decade. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Hamilton, home favorite. I don't know if we could say that many times this year. And 47.5. Well, I'm going to take the under. I'll start with that. I don't think these teams are going to put up tons of points. I think it'll be close. Will it be less than a field goal? Oh man, I'll take Hamilton. I'll take Hamilton, Ryan. What do you got?
Here's the problem. The Ticats are dead to me after last week, so I don't want to pick them. But Calgary does not inspire me whatsoever here either. So, I'll take the emotion of them of last week out of it, and I will take the Ticats to win this one at home as well. I feel better about how they've played lately than I do with Calgary. I think they've shown the ability to take over some games. Calgary has just been hit and miss left and right. Over under, yeah, I probably got to agree with you and go with the under on this game. Not by much, but I think they will hit it.
So now for our friend FM fans watching, we took your team, man, so they better show up.
Yeah, that was personal growth for me. I was not going to take them coming into this podcast, but over the last hour of therapy, I've moved on. I'm ready to go back to it again. And if they get it wrong again this week, well, then they're officially, not picking them the rest of the season. After that, speaking of Hamilton, before we get into fantasy talk and that fun stuff. We had a big announcement this week of not the Grey Cup halftime show, but the Friday night Grey Cup festival show. Carrie Underwood is going to be headlining that. What did you think?
At first, I was thought it was fake. And I was like, Adam, that's really good photoshopping because he's the one that put it in their Discord chat. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, that's cool. And then you think at first it was kind of weird. And I was kind of like, no, and then I more thought about it. She's a big football fan. Her husband's from Southern Ontario and Mike Fisher. I'm just more, and I was like, why, if she's a Friday, who the heck's on Sunday?
Yeah, that was interesting as well. And interesting timing also, because the NFL just announced Super Bowl act with, what is it? I think it's Usher, right? Yeah, so they announced the Super Bowl act, and immediately that's get people talking about the CFL halftime show as well. And I've heard a lot of rumors and talk that, or it's probably just people talking, but that it might be the Arkells again, which didn't they just do the Grey Cup in Hamilton 2 years ago?
I saw somebody, I mean, you never know what's true on the X anymore, but someone said that it's going to be the best halftime show ever that they've heard rumors. So I don't know if that screams Arkells.
Well, we haven't gotten the call yet, so clearly it's not going to be the best halftime show.
I find it. Is that that's not televised though, is it? It's just
it is.
Oh, is it the festival is televised?
Oh, not the festival part, I don't think. No.
Okay. Because I was like, that's even crazier that they're willing. Because I'm pretty sure she makes $1 million a Sunday to have her song on Sunday Night Football. So if that's the price range, I wonder what she costs to do a festival for, great just a Friday night, right?
Yeah, and it's a huge get. That is a huge name, one of the biggest country music stars in the world. Where did my camera go? It does this thing where it disappears. I'm still here. Don't worry. There we go. I'm back.
Does she have to sing I'm Waiting All Day for Sunday Night since the Grey Cup is on Sunday night?
Maybe. I don't know.
I wonder if she's allowed to say that. That's one thing, though, I was actually wondering, because I was wondering why she's not the Sunday and versus that. I wonder if contractually things, you know what I mean? She's a major spokesperson for the NFL, and then her to play a halftime for a competing thing on Sunday. I wonder. I'm even surprised it was a Friday because of her connection with the NFL. You know what I mean? But whatever.
Yeah, I actually I saw your theory on that, and I liked it. It was interesting.
And she's married to Mike Fisher, Nashville Predator and Ottawa Senator hockey player, right? So,
what more could you want? No, it's a big name for the CFL to get somebody like that. If they're going to top that for a halftime show yet, too.
I mean, Taylor Swift, it's obvious. That's why she's dating. That's the reason why she's dating Travis Kelly, just so she can learn some things about football, but not make it too obvious. Because if she came to Winnipeg to watch a game, that'd be too obvious. So that's my theory.
The Taylor Swift thing with I don't know if we want to get into that I never thought I'd talk about Taylor Swift on this podcast, but
only the NFL where they've already got every other demographic. They got male, 12 to 80 locked down 100%. They have the massive ratings, and then what can they do to improve it? Let's get the most famous, one of the most famous people, where people are spending thousands of dollars on her and on tickets Just to stand outside, people are paying hundreds of dollars. I saw people were buying people's contacts that went to Taylor Swift. Seems ridiculous. Let's get her to date probably the most popular player.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the NFL. That's like, if we were talking about script, that is awesome. That is awesome. And then have her sit with Mrs. Mama Kelsey, like
on his jersey sales multiplied by 4. Like
that was like the most watched game. That was like the most watched non-playoff Super Bowl game or something too, I thought. And it's just ridiculous. And my TikTok all day has just been girls explaining football to other girls so they can watch now. And I'm like, geez, it's great. But I mean, hey, it works for the game. And
yeah, no, took the NFL by storm this weekend for sure.
We'll answer. I want to answer a couple of comments. Richard, you mean your brother doesn't watch the podcast? No, my brother's not a CFL guy. He's a loser. And he kind of likes the Riders, but he's not a CFL guy because he's a loser. And the Jets, who asked about the Jets jersey? Chris, the new Jets jersey. That's what does Simon Cowell used to say? That's a no for me. You know, like that. That looks like some crap a 12-year-old makes on NHL 2K or whatever. Like it, awful.
I agree. I didn't like the new Winnipeg Jets hockey jersey.
I like their heritages are, you know, it's great. The white and the navy. I don't mind the blue aviator. It's not my favorite, but it looks like my kid took a blue crayon and it just looks awful.
But I don't know if it can get worse than the Bombers camouflage jerseys from way back when. Those were pretty bad.
Those were pretty bad
as well. All right, let's get into our fantasy players to watch for this week in the CFL. Again, we'll go through a couple of names I've got per position. We'll see if Trey's got anybody else to mention there that I don't already have on the list. Let's start with the quarterbacks. Your top 3 to keep an eye on here for me. It starts off with Vernon Adams Jr. He's $13,500 this week, averaging 24.4 fantasy points per game in his last 6 and 22 in games on the season where he didn't get hurt. That's a pretty darn good total. He's averaging 51 rushing yards in his last 3 games. So he's been running the ball a little bit more often. And what did he do last time out against the Riders? He threw for 455 yards and 3 touchdowns. Similarly, same price, a lot of similar stats. Zach Collaros is $13,500 this week. And again, you ignore the game he got hurt and left early. He's averaged 20.6 points per game on the season. He also faces an Argos defense that gives up the second most passing yards per game, the second most passing touchdowns in the league. And also, if they're resting starters, I think the Bombers' offense could be out there putting up points pretty regularly in this game. So I think there's a lot of room for yards, room for touchdowns for one Zach Collaros. And if you want a slightly cheaper play, I also do like Dustin Crum at $11,000. Back-to-back games of 29 or more points for him. 5 games over 24 in his last 10, or in his 10 starts on the year. The others, you're hovering maybe around 9 to 15 points in those other ones. He's a big boomer bust guy, right? Like 6 rushing touchdowns in his last 5 games, 55 rushing yards per game for him. The matchup against Montreal is tough. They shut down the pass pretty well, but they also give up a lot to the run, which is Crum's greatest strength, is his rushing ability. So I like this matchup. I like the play potentially of Crum as well, because I feel like a lot of people are going to go that Adams or Collaros route. So, if you want to be different and play a boomer bust play, I think Crum's the guy there. VA, Collaros, Crum, any other names you want to throw in here at quarterback?
Well, since I'm out of every playoffs in CFL football, I'll just throw together some madness here. I went with Powell because we were saying Hamilton could do it, and I think that's a pretty important game against Calgary. So we might get some garbage points in fantasy quarterback. But, stay away from Toronto. And I would even maybe stay away from Winnipeg. Did you say Collaros?
I did say Collaros.
Did you? I would stay away. Because, again, if it's a game that gets out of hand at halftime and they're up, why would Bombers keep Collaros in? I mean, they do keep Collaros in. Osh does keep him in a lot longer than most fans are comfortable with. But
if they kept him in until the fourth quarter when he put up 5 touchdowns in the first half against the Riders, maybe. Right?
Maybe.
I think he plays long enough to hit the point total.
Yeah, maybe Collaros. Yeah, I'd take, whatever.
All right, let's look at running backs here. 3 names to mention here. Taquan Mizell, $9,500 was the top running back last week with 30 fantasy points. The Riders have allowed an average of 25.4 points to starting running backs in the last 3 weeks. We listed off the yardage earlier in the show. They've given up at least 130 rushing yards in 3 straight games. So the matchup there is mighty favorable. And he's also averaging 5.5 targets in his last 4 games. So he's getting a lot of work through the air there as well. I really like Taquan Mizell as a play here this week. And, not too high of a price there. I also really like Devontae Williams at $9,000. He's averaging 19 carries a game in his last 3, which is the most in the CFL. Faces a Montreal defense that we just talked about as being better against the pass, not as much against the run. They give up 14.3 points per game to starting running backs. With the Elks being on the bye, that is the best rushing matchup to pick for this week. And Brady Oliveira, he's more expensive, but he is $13,000. But again, at home, after a bye, after the loss, Argos resting starters. There is a very real scenario where the Bombers get up big and run an Oliveira, all day long, especially late in the game. 14 plus carries in 8 of his last 11, and his lowest has been 9 over that span. So he's going to get a lot of usage no matter what, and he's done great things with it this year, and he's rested coming off of the bye week. So those are the 3 running backs I'm really strongly considering this week for fantasy. Any other names there for you outside of Mizell, Williams, and Oliveira?
I have Butler again. I kind of like what he's been doing lately, but I also have Oliveira. I agree with you because he's one guy too I wouldn't take out. They actually have taken him out. I think a little bit earlier than Collaros over the last few weeks, but he hits his totals.
And they still have, that's the thing with Winnipeg. They still have enough to play for where, the point where you're resting guys, if this game gets to that, and I should be saying if, because, the Argos are a deep team, right? And they could come out, they could win this one. They could, keep it close. But if it's to a scenario where you're resting guys, that's going to be because you've already put a ton of fantasy points on the board. So... I
thought remember the last time the Blue Bombers played the Argos with a backup quarterback, they lost in Regina. So
good times. Yeah. It's a good thing we've got the Grey Cup rematch this week. Let's talk wide receivers here. A couple of names. I was undecided on some of these wide receivers. I found it tough to find some top names to put in here. But a couple I am for sure looking at. Reggie Begelton, 11,500. Last week I faced Mike in our Discord fantasy league, and I needed the win over Mike, and I needed enough variance in the lineups. I wanted Tim White in there. I needed to make sure he didn't have Tim White. So I convinced him to switch to Reggie Begelton. And what did Reggie Begelton do last week? Put up 13 catches on 14 targets and massive fantasy total. 100 plus yards, touchdown or 2. I don't have the exact numbers actually here. I will grab it right here. 29.9 fantasy points for Begelton last week. He also put up a week of 41.3 earlier in the season. 5 games of 11 or more targets on the season for him. 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Ticats also allow 11 fantasy points to right slot back, second best matchup in the league. So I like that for Reggie Begelton. I do like the play of Kenny Lawler at 9,500 this week as well. He's about as sure of a touchdown play as you can get. Touchdowns in 6 of his last 7 games. He's good for one almost every week. The Argos pass defense gives up a lot. Second worst left wideout matchup, 11.9 points per game there. And he gets a decent floor of targets, 5+ in every game but one, and 7+ in all but 3 of them for Kenny Lawler there. Couple Ticats receivers, I'll go back and forth on these. It's either Tim White or Terry Godwin. I feel like I want one of them almost every week, and I pick the wrong one almost every week between those two. So what I'll say is I'll throw them kind of both in here, as I think Godwin has kind of had the better floor. He's consistently getting that target share, and he's been, putting touchdowns on the board decently here and there, and he's probably going to consistently get you in that 10 to 15 point range. But I think the ceiling on Tim White is even higher, right? Godwin the last 2 weeks, 16.1, 16.8. Tim White had a down week last week, but just a couple weeks ago was putting up 25, 38 points, etc. So it depends on what the rest of your week and your lineup looks like. This is the last game of the week, so if you leave yourself enough cash to kind of maybe decide based on that, that's kind of a direction I would go there. And then finally, I will mention Montreal is facing the Ottawa Redblacks. So, they don't defend the pass very well. There could be room for a lot of passing yards. So I think in that case, I'd probably want to look at in the direction of a guy like Austin Mack at $11,000, who gets the largest share of the targets for Montreal. 8 last week, 10 the week before. Ignore the game he got ejected, 13, 7, and 13 in his past several games there. The touchdowns are few and far between for anyone in that Montreal passing game, but I think Mac just gets, again, much like Reggie Begelton, that elite usage that is probably going to lead to a pretty good fantasy day for you there. I thought about maybe Keon Hatcher. I thought about Alexander Hollins. Dominic Rhymes coming back into the lineup kind of messes up, some of the target sharing. They've had some down weeks here and there. So, I'm just going to stick with these names here for the recommendations for big name wide receivers. We also have a couple of cheaper ones I'll talk about when we get to our value plays in a minute or two. But any bigger priced wide receivers that you've got in your lineup that I haven't mentioned here?
Nope, you named them all.
Nice. That was efficient. All right. Let's talk defenses. This is my least favorite one to talk about because I don't put much time into studying the defenses, really, because they more often than not are not worth it. So I don't know. Let's start with you on this one then, because I covered your picks on the last one. What are you? Which defense are you thinking of here?
I just put Hamilton just because it kind of fit my price range. That's pretty much all I added. I thought maybe that could be a sloppy game where you see both quarterbacks throw a couple picks and not really high scoring. So it's kind of went with that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good potential defensive matchups this week as well, right? Like Saskatchewan, $5,400, and they've had miserable weeks the past couple of weeks, but VA keeps throwing picks, and much the same. Zach Laros, as good as he's been, keeps throwing interceptions. So the Argos defense could benefit off of that as well. But, the question is how often are they going to be out there on the field? They're more expensive at $10,000, so I'm a bit hesitant to go that direction. Ottawa puts up some big numbers last week, and they faced Montreal, who has struggled on the offensive line. I think maybe one of the ones I'm leaning towards, though, is that Alouettes defense against Ottawa, because, again, just getting those sacks on Dustin Crum and Ottawa not being able to put up high point totals, you could get, some extra points off of Montreal's defense there. But, again, defenses, just pick the guys that pick whatever fits your price range left over. All right, let's talk value plays here as well. I took all of your high-priced receivers off the board. Any cheaper receivers you've got in your lineup you want to talk about?
Phil Pott at $6,000. I think that's kind of a steal of a deal to fit him in my lineup. We just take him out and we'll look at a couple low prices here that will fit. What do you consider a low? 7,000 lower?
Yeah, it kind of varies every week, I guess, compared to the rest of the field. There weren't there weren't a ton. This week was tougher than last week for me. I'm trying to also come up with different names weekly as well. So it's not.
Is Odom's Duke back in the lineup, or is he still?
He is, and that is actually the first guy on my list here. So I got some stats for you. $6,000, 8.1 targets per game on the season, only one game with less than 6, 3 games of 10 or more. Hasn't done a whole ton with those targets in a lot of games. It's kind of small totals, small yardage. That's kind of Jake Mayer's specialty right now. But the Ticats do allow a favorable 13.3 points per game to left slot backs. And it's a go out and show it moment for Odom's Dukes. You were put on the practice roster earlier this season. You got a chance to come back in. The guy who took your spot has been released. Go out and show your team that it was worth it for them to make that decision there. Who else we got on the list here? Keon Schaefer-Baker, $4,700. You called it last week. You said he was primed for a breakout, and he did.
And I didn't have him in my lineup.
That's always how it works, right? 20.6 fantasy points for him last week. He's got 8 targets, 6 or 7 catches in 2 of his last 3 games. Decent touchdown potential because Dolagawa throws a couple of games and has looked his way a few times near the end zone. So I like Schaefer-Baker at 4,700 there. I didn't have Philpott on my list because I was trying to find a couple of the cheaper options, and I kind of just like the volume of Odom's Dukes a little bit better than Philpott. I need to see more consistency in the number of targets there before I'm necessarily going that direction. Also, Philpott does have the toughest wide receiver matchup of any position for Montreal against Ottawa this week. They give up far less to that spot than they do anywhere else. That steers me slightly away in that category. Final one here, Braylon Addison is $2,600. It's taken a while for him to get going since his injuries, but last week he put up 15 points off of 5 catches on 5 targets, 40 yards, and a touchdown. So, I mean, we know what he's capable of. He's a former CFL All-Star. He was the next up-and-coming receiver in the CFL. And, yeah, the injuries sidelined him quite a bit. But for that talent level, $2,600, you need 2 or 3 catches to hit the total. And I think he can deliver that value for you. Any chance you'd take a chance on Cameron Dukes at quarterback for $5,000 for the Toronto Argonauts this week?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Like if you look at stats, like Bombers haven't done great against quarterbacks. They have limited film on this year, right? So
that is true. They always do struggle with that, yeah.
And I mean, you know, he's got a throwing arm, so he should be able to get some passes completed, you think? But
yeah, I'm a little less like I used to be take the bare minimum price quarterback when it came to fantasy football every week. I think the captain feature steers me away from that, right? A little bit, because I think the safest play in a lot of cases for captain is the quarterback because they're in on every offensive play. And, you know, being able to double up those totals is less of a shot in the dark. Whereas, well, if you're taking Dukes, you're not going to make him your captain there. So, you know, if somebody else gets a QB like Vernon Adams putting up 30 points and then they double it and get 60 versus you take Dukes and he puts up 5 to 10, kind of puts you big behind the 8 ball there. And then you got to hope that another play lands. So I'm less in on it. I also just don't know enough about him to be excited about the play at this time. But I wish him well in this week's matchup. Any other value plays? I know you were scrolling through it. Anybody else you had to mention, or should we move on to the next segment?
I'm good, man. I'm ready to just call it quits on CFL fantasy this year. Be out of everything. And I don't think I'm going to get a top score of the week and snag some Grey Cup tickets or anything. So, fine.
Well, this is the last week in CFL fantasy. This week or next week is the last week to get in the Champions League. You got to finish top 30 on the week. So we'll see if anybody there who listens to this is able to do so. we've both had some really good weeks this year. We've been consistent, in our scores. I don't think, at least I haven't made it. I don't know about you.
Not weekly. I'm sitting top 300 overall for the season. I'll take that.
Yeah, that's very good. Let's take a look at a couple of our leagues here. In our draft league, Adam had the top score of the week, 109.2 points for Team Adam last week. Reggie Beggleton is to thank for that, among others, on his squad. So kudos to Adam for that one. Rough week for the rest of us, though. Mike had 75.6. I had 69. Trey at 45.9 for you. Rough week.
Yeah. I went back to normal after going 5-0 last week and everything. So
overall standings, I won't even mention. You're like 100 and something ahead of Adam for third place, but you're almost 200 behind Mike and I for first and second. I'm 29 points back of Mike, and I would be in first place if I had started Taquan Mizell last week after spending the money on free on waiver wire, but I put him on the bench, so regret there. This was the final week of the regular season in the CFL Podcast Fantasy League. We're facing off against other podcast hosts there, and all of us lost this week. Yeah, all of us lost this week in matchups there, but final standings, I did manage to finish first in the league, so I will be going on to the playoffs and face Oz from the Rouge, White, and Blue in round one in the playoffs here, but Trey, unfortunately, just falling outside the playoff line, and Adam also missing the playoffs this season.
I vote for a playoff format change. Wild card, or top four in standings, sure. 2 wild cards, the 2 highest in points after that.
Oh.
Because that's what I do in one of my NFL fantasies, and I was like, ooh, that actually might make it interesting.
Yeah, we can talk about rule changes there for next year for sure.
Because I got the second highest score overall. And I missed the playoffs.
Rough luck, man. Rough luck. Same thing, our Discord league, playing with other members of our Discord community. Those results are now final as well. It was a stressful final week in that league. There was a lot riding on fights for those playoff spots. And, Adam lost to Brandon. He's out. I lost to Mike. I'm out. And because I lost to Mike and you lost to Discord user Sandwiches, Trey, you unfortunately are out as well, finishing just outside the playoff line. The 3 of us are out, but Mike is the sole champion left for the CFC crew. His first year playing the CFL Fantasy, he makes it into 6th place, claims that final playoff spot, and he'll be going head-to-head with members of our Discord league in the playoffs here. And kudos to everybody. That has been, we've got a lot of great fantasy players and the listeners of this podcast. Like, pat yourselves on the back for a sec, folks, because I'm our fantasy expert, and I finished 9th in the league. I'm our self-proclaimed fantasy expert, and I had a rough go.
If you told me I was going to be 2nd or 4th in overall points in those 2 leagues, I would have been ecstatic. But missing the playoffs, yeah, it's tough. Weekly matchups, and for any of the guys who are playing the NFL one, I'm going to get you in that. That's...
Well, you won't get me, but you can get everybody else.
Playoffs. We'll see. We play once more, I think, and then playoffs.
Oh, yeah. I'll see you in the playoffs. So best of luck to everybody playing the playoffs there as well. If you're in that Discord league, Trey, you're giving betting odds for our matchups there. I don't know. Do we want to get into that? It's not going to be very relevant. It's not going to be super relevant for anybody else who's not in that league.
You know what? This is our show. This is our show. We do what we want. If they don't like it, let's see where are they? Where did I put them?
You put them in the fantasy league chat.
The head-to-head. Oh, Adam and his stupid gifts. I can't even find them. Why am I so dumb?
You opened betting lines for our spreads for these matchups and over-unders. I guess
Yeah.
just talk a little bit about, how you came up with those and whether or not the CFC sportsbook is coming.
Oh, the book is wide open. I accept e-transfers, guys. Will you get your payouts? Yeah, we'll see. Because there's a big what's the vig is pretty big at this betting spur. My cutout of it's pretty big. What I did was I took the season average and like average per game, and then I took the last 3 weeks and I kind of made an average, and I just made a mumble jumble. So if Mike's watching, it was no disrespect, man, that you're plus 16. Like, it's just numbers. So I remember that one, and the other one was -3, right? Sandwiches is playing Mike, right? That was the 16, and then the Richard and Brandon was +3. Yeah, so that one's gonna be tight. I would definitely bet on that one. Are you muted, or my sound messed up?
Nope, I'm muted.
Okay, because you know how many times I've muted my computer and I didn't realize.
Yeah, I was just saying the final. I'm just happy I can enjoy watching those matchups unfold stress-free, feet up. Although I do have another matchup in the other league that I got to prep for fantasy playoffs there. But yeah, we're getting down the stretch here of the CFL regular season. A couple of weeks left to go. Then we'll get into playoffs as well, which I think we're all very much looking forward to. But let's start wrapping things up here, Trey. I think we almost finished on time. Slightly over, but that's fine. We've had some fun here tonight, and we'll be back again next week to do the same time, same place. Week 18 preview show. We'll do our storylines, betting odds, and fantasy picks in that one as well. Let me get this set up. That's not what I want. Get the social media slide up here on the video screen for those watching the video. Check out the Discord community, like we said, in the meantime as well. That is free to join. There's a link in the episode description to do so if you want to come chat with us between episodes there. But you can also find us on social media. We are on Twitter at CF Countdown Pod, or X, whatever you want to call it. Facebook.com/CF Countdown Pod there. I'm at Cooper Trooper 42. I don't really tweet much. Mike's at Mike Garrell. Adam's at Adam Stewart 1. I know they've all got lots of stuff going on. Trey, I know you're a busy guy often as well. What are you all doing these days?
Oh, man, you think it's going to stop with horse racing, but a bunch of tracks end and more start. So it's, I think this weekend, all three Western Canadian provinces, anyway, that have harness racing have stake races. So lots to do. So check out that. I have my harness racing podcast. Yeah, and that's it.
Right on. I did see a question in the chat here. What happened to the Drive Home Call-In Show? Excellent question. That was the bonus show we were doing in the Discord community weekly there for a bit as well. Scheduling and time is what unfortunately happened to that one. It's tough for me to do it driving home without somebody available to read the chat and take the questions for me. I know Mike's been tied up. My work schedule's also been more sporadic. And then just trying to find the time to edit it as well, because I already spent a couple of days just prepping some of the notes and stuff and the fantasy stuff for the show. So I'd like to at some point bring back that kind of extra content, but right now the schedules are pretty jammed up the rest of the season. So unfortunately don't know if that show will be coming back this year. But we'll still be going Wednesday nights the rest of the way, at least previewing the following week in the CFL. I think that is all I had left to talk about here. I can't find my wrap-up notes. I lost the tab for it. So I will just say we appreciate all the fun, you tuning in, and we would love if you do all the fun things such as like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, Share the show with your friends. Help us grow the show. On behalf of Trey, I'm Ryan saying thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.